Hello, this is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is November the 4th, 2024, one day before we get to go and vote. Today, I want to talk about U.S. government policy on policy from the perspective of my observations the last 6 or 8 months. So, what I want to talk about: college professors in politics, Social Security, and kitchen table issues. Let's start with college professors in politics. This weekend, for me, I heard again what I've been hearing for the last 8 months since the election cycle started. No matter which streaming service or TV shows that do news, and even the weekend shows like Meet the Press and Face the Nation, they are all the same. Meaning, when they talk about politics, have you ever noticed that they will invite either politicians from Congress that are going to be biased one way or the other, meaning they don't have regular people come on there and talk about issues affecting them. And I'll get back to that part in a second. But on most of these shows, especially on the radio shows and the podcasts, they have experts. And when I'm talking about experts, we're talking about college professors. And it's interesting to me because based on some of these subjects, for example, if you're talking about the economy and you invite on some college professor, and I'm not saying that they're not smart, but what I do think is in this example, if they're not currently running a business or in the Federal Reserve type jobs, how do they know what they're talking about? Another example is this whole polling thing has just been out of hand since it started. And you've got people speculating now to who they think is going to win. And again, they're pulling it from people. There's no such thing as a polling expert because you're basing it on gathering data. In the last two election cycles, we're not even sure that people are accurately giving their opinions. And it's just been interesting. People profess to be experts on a subject when they've never actually done the actual job. So I'm calling them out for that, especially, like I said earlier, the radio. And if you look at local politics, not just national politics, they have, no kidding, experts that have never been in the jobs that they would have any information about why things are occurring. Here's another simple example. So we know that people aren't buying houses, and the average age went from 30 to 34. And they had on an expert who was a professor from some university. And again, I'm not saying that the professor doesn't know, but he's basing it off of classroom environment and some research that he did in a vacuum, right? Because we all know that one of the reasons why people can't buy houses is because they have bad credit and they can't get the loan, or number two, they don't have the down payment. So when we apply this to politics and inflation and all of those things, we have people telling us stuff that telling us when they haven't really done the job themselves. They're not in the industry. The next one is Social Security. And I thought that this was very interesting. This weekend, Social Security really got talked about finally, and the ad said, "We want to save Social Security." Okay? Now, no matter which side you're on, they will tell you how to save it. But what they don't talk about is we could save Social Security today if Congress would lift the maximum amount that someone can pay in or on Social Security. What am I talking about? Currently, it's capped at $1 million. So after you pay in $1 million of your income, it stops. Can you imagine what would happen if they lifted that and people who made more money would pay in more? And it's not just millionaires. There are people out there working their butts off, making a great living. And I don't think that they should be punished, but that's not what we're talking about. But Social Security, the soundbite was, "We will save Social Security." Okay, well, that sounds great, but they can't personally save Social Security. You'd have to change the rules. And how about that idea that I just gave them? They could have that solved in 30 minutes. Next is kitchen table issues. And this weekend again, I was hearing from both sides that they want to identify as knowing what it's like to live on a fixed income, that prices are high, and quite honestly, none of the candidates are in that situation. If you look at the presidential candidates, that wouldn't be true. But let's get to something that's not talked about. So if I'm looking at my kitchen table, I'm wondering, I'm working, I'm bringing in money, and I have bills to pay. I've got to keep my yard in repair. I've got to repair my car. Now, from a bigger point of view, we can look at those could be parts of the federal government. For example, am I going to keep spending money on house repairs and groceries if I'm not making enough in my paycheck to cover those expenses? And when I get in debt, am I going to say, "Oh, well, I'll just keep using my credit"? Credit in this case would be using the credit card. Well, what's going to happen after a while with that credit card is that you're going to max it out, and then the credit card company is going to tell you that you can't do that. Now, we don't need, and I told you I would come back to this, we don't need PhD college professors telling us about the economy. And this is just one example, we understand that because around the kitchen table, as they like to put it, we're talking about the same thing. Oh, and by the way, are we going to do all of these things, like I said, pay for the car, pay for the house, do repairs outside, and max out our credit cards. And oh, by the way, our neighbor needs $100. Are we going to go and give them the $100? These are the type of issues that most Americans can relate to, and Americans are very, very intelligent. Contrary to what you hear sometimes coming from these different commentators, these experts, and all of that, those types of things. And it just gets annoying having experts tell you things that you know are not exactly like they are saying. And what we need to do is to have them, meaning the politicians, have people on their shows that are actually living it. Why do I say that? So every election cycle, they started doing these town halls and things like that. And that's the other thing too. They only have on people, and I've seen this, that agree with their point of view, no matter which channel you're on. And have you ever noticed on especially the evening shows, the morning shows for news, if it's the actual candidate and they don't agree, they start asking her the questions, and then they gently say, well, it's not really like that. That's not true. How many times have you seen that? Differences of opinion is okay, but if I'm being interviewed, I am telling you my views on it. And it's not their job in the media to tell you that what you're saying is wrong. And they heavily do that with, if they ask you who you're going to vote for. I've seen these reporters and these commentators ask a question and then they come back at you really fast. Well, did you know? That type of back and forth, especially with regular people, is unnecessary. What's the outcome? Today, right now, November 4th, 2024, the day before election, people are not going to tell you who they're going to vote for. Why? Because if they don't agree, meaning the newspapers and the commentators and all that stuff, they're going to push back and make it so uncomfortable that you're not going to tell them anything else after that. So remember, tomorrow go and vote. And I think that a lot of us aren't saying who we're voting for, not even to our own spouses. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Let me know what you think.